All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You can have a seat. Welcome back. Trust everything's gone well for you thus far, and your accommodations were all right. We're ready to resume with witness testimony, and so I'll turn it back over to Ms. Corey. Ms. Wolfson.
Yes, Your Honor. State Code Officer Holmes.
Officer Holmes, please. Good morning, officer. If you'll come here to the front for us, please. And right before the clerk, she'll have you raise your right hand and administer the oath.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
All right, officer, if you'll come right over here and have a seat for us, please. All right, Ms. Wolfson.
Good morning, officer. Could you please state and spell your name for the record?
It's Robert Holmes, R-O-B-E-R-T-H-O-L-M-E-S.
And officer, where are you currently employed?
Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been employed by the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
April will be 7 years.
Are you assigned a particular identification number?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
65055.
Now, prior to becoming an officer of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, did you receive any sort of training?
Prior to, yes, ma'am, I was in the military.
Okay. Well, in between military and then joining Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, what sort of training did you have to become a police officer?
None. As far as the academy, none.
Did you go through the academy?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Could you explain to the jury what the academy entails?
The police academy entails just going over the basics of self-defense, how to be a police officer, how to act and react, state laws, ordinances.
Okay, do you also learn then about investigations and things of that nature?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Now, Officer Holmes, what is your current assignment within the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
Patrol.
Are you assigned to a particular zone?
Zone 3.
Could you explain to the jury where Zone 3 is?
Zone 3 is downtown, from downtown south pretty much to the St. Johns County border over to Beach Boulevard.
Excuse me for interrupting, Ms. Wolfson. I don't know if that microphone is on, and if it's not, it may have yet died again. Just so you know, ladies and gentlemen, they're battery powered, and so sometimes if they've been, all right, that one is working. So we have to change them out, I guess, to the IT people handle all that stuff. Anyway, thank you, Ms. Wolfson, for turning that on.
Sure, Your Honor.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's okay. Officer Holmes, what shift do you currently work?
Currently I work Watch 4.
And what hours is Watch 4?
Watch 4 currently is 13:30 or 1:30 till 12:55 at night.
Okay. Now, Officer Holmes, I'd like to take your attention back to November 23rd of 2012. Were you working that day?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And were you working that day as a patrol officer assigned to Zone 3?
ma'am.
To Zone 3?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that then here in Jacksonville,
Yes.
in Duval County?
Yes, ma'am.
Officer Holmes, back on November 23rd of 2012, what shifts were you working?
At that time I was working Watch 5, which is 13:30 or 3:30 till 2:55 in the morning.
Okay, now back in November of 2012, also, did you work with a particular partner, another officer?
Yes, ma'am.
And would you call that person, I guess, your beat partner?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was that at the time?
Don Valentine.
Now, Officer Holmes, back in November 2012, were you assigned a particular call sign?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
At the time, then it was Hotel 256.
And could you explain to the jury what a call sign is used for?
Call sign is assigned to each individual officer so we know, so other officers in dispatch knows who's on the radio and who needs assistance or who's getting a call.
So, for example, instead of calling in and saying Officer Holmes and then your identification number, you would just say Hotel 256?
Correct.
Now, was there a reason for the hotel being used?
Hotel is a subsector of the zone. Each zone has its own subsector, actually 3 subsectors within that zone.
Okay, and what particular subsector then of Zone 3 were you working?
At that time, Hotel 2.
And could you tell the jury where exactly Hotel 2 is?
Hotel 2 is Bay Meadows Southside area.
Okay. Now, Officer Holmes, during the course of your shift back on November 23rd, 2012, did you respond to a call at the Gate gas station at the corner of Southside and Bay Meadows Road?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And could you tell the jury how it was that you ended up responding to that call?
We heard on the radio, Officer Fortuna put out a shots fired, which is a 3388. That's the call sign or the designation, and Officer myself and Officer Valentine responded to the gate gas station.
Okay, now where were you and Officer Valentine when you heard this call come out?
We were just finished eating our meal break, and we were on Southside Boulevard.
And Officer Holmes, do you remember what time it was when you heard this call come out?
It was 7:39.
Is that PM?
Yes, ma'am.
Officer, could you also explain to the jury how it is that you hear these calls come out?
We heard it on the car radio. Everybody has, on Zone 3, we use a channel called Alpha 3. It's just for our zone, so everybody in the zone can hear what's going on with each other.
Okay. Now, once you heard this call, what did you and Officer Valentine do?
We made our way south on Southside Boulevard to the gate gas station.
And can you explain to the jury what direction of travel you took in order to get to that gate gas station?
Once we got on the gate, we had to do a U-turn at the Tinseltown area and proceed to south.
Okay, and Officer, I'm showing you what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 3. Is that up on the screen in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
And Officer, can you, using this map, and you should be able to use your finger on it, can you show the jury the direction of travel you took in order to get to the gate gas station? Now, Officer, what entrance, and you can use State's Exhibit 3 as well, can you explain to the jury how it was that you turned into the gate gas station?
Yes, ma'am. At Old Bay Meadows Road, which is this intersection here, we made a left turn into the rear portion of the parking lot.
Okay, and was there a reason you entered in that particular entrance?
Yes. When Officer Fortuna put out a vehicle was fleeing the scene, a red Durango, was coming south at the back side of the gate gas station. There's two back entrances, so this is the closest one to us.
Okay, and just to clarify, are you referring then to the entrance that you just put the red line on as one of the back entrances?
Yes, ma'am.
And then could you also explain to the jury where it is you are referring to the second back entrance?
Second one's right here.
Okay, and then, so those would be the two back entrances to the
Yes, ma'am.
gate, according to you?
Yes, ma'am.
And then what would be the front entrance?
Front entrance will be right here.
Okay.
Officer, I need you to speak into that microphone a
Okay.
little bit closer, thank you.
Now, Officer Holmes, when you're responding to the scene, was Officer Valentine also responding to the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you all ride together, or do you have separate patrol cars?
Separate patrol cars.
And are those marked police cars?
Yes, ma'am.
When you responded to the scene, did you respond with lights and sirens on?
Yes, ma'am.
Approximately how long did it take you to get to the scene?
Approximately 5 minutes or so.
Now, Officer Holmes, when you pulled into that parking lot, to that back entrance where you made the red line, were you in front of Officer Valentine, or was she behind you?
I was in front of her.
And Officer Holmes, I'm now showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1. Can you show the jury the path you took then to get to the gate gas station once you turned into that parking lot?
Yes, and once we pulled into Old Bay Meadows Road, which is down here, we drove on the outside of the parking lot.
When you pulled into that parking lot, did you see the red Durango at first, when you were down in that parking lot?
No, ma'am.
At some point, did you in fact see the red Durango?
Yes.
And now I'm showing you what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 4. And could you tell the jury what State's Exhibit 4 is a picture of?
The red Durango.
And is that then the position it was in when you pulled into the parking lot?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Officer Holmes, prior to actually pulling into the gate gas station, did you hear what is called a BOLO go out over the radio?
Yes, ma'am.
And what does BOLO stand for?
Be on the lookout.
What is the purpose of a BOLO?
It's where an officer puts out information over the radio so other officers in the area can be aware of an incident pertaining to a suspect, victim, missing person.
Now, Officer, in this case, who actually put a BOLO out?
Officer Fortuna.
And what did you learn from that BOLO?
That the red Durango, at that point, the red Durango had returned, and the vehicle fleeing the scene at that time, the suspect vehicle he put out was a small four-door car, possibly black.
I don't know the exact characterization of the vehicle from the sunlight.
All right, sustained.
May we approach, Your Honor?
Sure. the objection sustained. You can rephrase the question, Ms. Wolfson.
Yes, Your Honor. Officer Bolo, Officer Holmes, based on this Bolo, did you learn then that the suspect vehicle was actually a dark-colored car?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Officer Holmes, I'm showing you what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 8. And in State's Exhibit 8, then just a close-up of the red Durango that you saw when you pulled into the parking lot. Is that
Yeah,
it?
I'm sorry, yes, ma'am. I did.
Okay, Officer Holmes, when you pulled into the parking lot, can you explain to the jury where exactly you parked your car?
I parked on the passenger side of rear. Do you want me to draw it?
Yes.
So I parked here.
And could you show the jury then where the front of your car would have been located?
Front of the car would have been here.
And that's that dot you just put on the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, Officer Holmes, when you parked your car, did you then get out of your car?
I did.
And where did you go once you got out of your car?
I walked along the driver's side of the vehicle, of the red Durango.
Now, Officer, were you the only patrol car on scene at this point in time?
No, ma'am.
Who else was on scene to your knowledge?
Officer Fortuna was already there, but I did not know where the patrol car was.
Okay.
And Officer Valentine was right behind me.
And where did Officer Valentine park her car?
Probably behind me, about 20 feet away.
Now, Officer Holmes, do you remember when you pull up behind this red Durango, whether or not you saw any of the occupants out of the car?
Yes, ma'am.
Who did you see out of the red SUV?
I saw there were two young black males standing on the sidewalk in front of it.
And using State's Exhibit 8, can you just put two red X's where those individuals were standing?
That would be on the back side of the door on the sidewalk.
Up on the sidewalk
Yes,
between the
ma'am, yeah.
gate and the red Durango?
Yes.
Now, Officer Holmes, what did you do once you got out of your car?
I approached them to see if we had a victim.
Okay. And was that to see whether or not someone had in fact been shot?
Yes, ma'am.
Based on what they told you, Officer Holmes, what did you do?
They told me someone had been shot in the back of the Durango, so I made my way to the rear driver's side door.
Officer Holmes, I'm now showing you State's Exhibit 28. Is this a photograph of the rear back or driver's side door?
Yes, ma'am.
When you got to that door, were you the one who opened the door?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Could you tell the jury what you saw when you opened that back driver's side rear door?
I saw a young black male sitting on the driver's side rear passenger seat, sobbing uncontrollably. He was cradling another young black male's head, and the second black male was stretched out across the seat.
Now, was that person who was stretched across the street, was he later identified to you as Jordan Davis?
Yes, ma'am, he was.
And Officer Holmes, can you in detail explain to the jury where exactly his body was positioned from what you could tell when you opened the door on this side?
He was sitting in the rear passenger seat, slumped over to the left. His right shoulder would have been on the other black male's right thigh. He was cradling him in his head almost as you would a baby.
Officer Holmes, what did you do when you first opened the door and saw this scene?
At that point, I was trying to see if all I saw was a young black male leaning over, so I didn't know if we had, one of the other gentlemen said had been shot, so I didn't know what point or if he was even injured or not. The one that was still sitting up was sobbing uncontrollably. I was trying to ask them to calm down so I could check the pulse of the other one that was laying down.
Officer, were you able to check Jordan Davis's pulse from this angle?
No, ma'am, was not.
What did you do?
At that point, I made my way over to the rear passenger side door.
And Officer, for the record, I'm showing you State's Exhibit 31. And is that then the rear passenger side door?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Were you then the one who opened this door?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you see when you opened this door?
I saw Jordan Davis slumped to the left-hand side of the vehicle.
And could you tell the jury the position of his body from this angle?
At this position, at this point, he was leaning over, so instead of his butt being flat, it was up in the air, leaning to the left.
Officer Holmes, from this side of the car, from the rear passenger side door, did you also then try to check for a pulse?
I did, but he was stretched out too far for me to check.
Okay. What did you do then after opening the rear passenger side door?
I'd see if we had any, usually with a gunshot, you might have pooling blood, so I checked the seat area in front of his stomach, didn't see any pooling blood, lifted his, it'd be the right side of his shirt up an inch or so to see if we had anything. I didn't want to disturb any evidence or hurt him anymore if we did.
And did you see any evidence of blood at this point in time?
No, ma'am.
Officer Holmes, did you then go back to the rear driver's side door?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And what did you do once you got around to the other side of the car?
I asked the male who was sitting he was still sobbing uncontrollably, and I asked him to calm down so I could check for the pulse on his friend.
Were you able to check for a pulse at that point in time?
I was, yes. Once I got him to calm down, a couple seconds later, I was able to check.
And did you find a pulse?
No, ma'am, I did not.
At that point in time, did you then ask the young gentleman who was still sitting up in the car holding Jordan Davis, did you ask him to get out of the car?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And after he got out of the car, where did he go?
He wouldn't stand with Officer Valentine.
Now, where were the two young men when you first saw them up on the sidewalk? Where were they standing at this point?
Once we learned we had someone in the car, in the vehicle that was shot, I asked them to stand with Officer Valentine.
And going back to State's Exhibit 8, can you show the jury on State's Exhibit 8 where then you had all three of these young men stand with Officer Valentine?
It would be off the picture on the side, on this area over here, off the picture.
Once Officer Valentine, you had that other young man get out of the car, what did you do?
We pulled Jordan Davis from the back of the vehicle onto the concrete.
And did you have help in doing that?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Who helped you do that?
Officer Valentine had a reserve officer with her at that point and a citizen.
Now, Officer Holmes, can you explain to the jury, and let me go to, State's Exhibit 21. Can you explain to the jury how the three of you pulled Jordan Davis out of the car?
Yes, ma'am, I was standing here. The reserve officer was inside the door here, inside the door jamb, and we pulled him this way, pulled him down and out.
And Officer Holmes, can you also on the screen show where you placed Jordan Davis when you got him out of the car?
His feet would have been here, his body out here, this way, with his head pointing this way.
And was he placed on his back?
Yes, ma'am, he was.
Once Jordan Davis was placed on the ground, what happened?
The citizen started performing CPR on him, and I checked to see if he had any obvious injuries.
Now, officer, when he started performing CPR, was he just doing chest compressions?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you notice as he was doing chest compressions?
I had Jordan's shirt lifted up a little bit on his right-hand side, up to probably about his sternum area, and we could see blood coming out of his back.
And Officer Holmes, is that then the blood that's on the parking lot floor?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you, Officer Holmes, still working on Jordan Davis with the civilian when Jacksonville Fire and Rescue showed up on scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And once they arrived on scene then, did they take over for the care of Jordan Davis?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you do after emergency personnel arrived on scene?
At that point, I left Jordan's body there with the personnel and tried to find witnesses for the incident.
Now, can you explain to the jury, officer, what it means to secure a witness?
Anybody on scene present, we ask them if they see anything. If they have seen anything, we ask them to stand by, get their basic information. That way, if they do slip out for whatever reason or leave, we have their information to contact them. We ask them to stand by for further questioning.
Is part of securing a witness also then to ask them not to discuss anything about
Yes,
what
ma'am,
they
yeah.
saw
We
with
try and
anyone
keep them
else?
separate, and we tell them specifically do not talk with each other.
Now, in this particular case, did you yourself secure any witnesses?
Yes, ma'am, 2 of them.
And where were those witnesses when you secured them?
They were standing on the gate gas station, or in front of the gate gas station on the sidewalk. There's a long sidewalk out front of the door.
Oops,
They were
let me go
standing
back. I apologize. The State's Exhibit 4?
If they were approximately here on the sidewalk.
Okay. And did you have conversations then with both of those witnesses, much like you just described to the jury?
Very brief ones, yes, ma'am.
Now, after securing these witnesses, did you have any other role at the scene?
I stood in front of the gate doors, the gate gas station doors, to make sure no one entered or left that was not authorized to be there.
And while you were standing at those doors, officer, was other law enforcement officers inside the store?
Yes, ma'am.
At some point, Officer Holmes, were you asked by homicide to transport anyone down to the police memorial building?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
And who were you asked to transport down to the police memorial building?
The other 3 occupants of the Durango.
Did you then place all 3 of them in the backseat of your patrol car?
Yes, ma'am.
And on your way down to the police memorial building, did they in any way discuss what had happened?
No, ma'am.
And what was their demeanor like, officer?
They were very shocked and in a state of disbelief. One of them kept saying, I can't believe this is happening. That was the only things that were said.
Have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Strolla, cross.
Yes, Your Honor. I may have a moment, Your Honor. Excellent, Judge.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Officer Holmes. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Okay. Thank you. Now, you said prior to law enforcement, you were in the Navy, correct?
Correct.
Did you receive any type of medical training or first responder training in the military?
You received very, very, very basic I
but
mean,
you did-
nothing, CPR, everybody does CPR training, and other than that, it's just how to apply a tourniquet, and that's about all.
All right, so you did receive formal medical training in your military experience in the Navy?
I wouldn't call it formal, but yes, sir.
Well, you're not a medical doctor, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And now, as a first responder, how long have you been a police officer?
April will be 7 years.
Okay. And in those 7 years, have you also been trained as a first responder and how to handle medical situations when you arrive on crime scenes, accidents, anything? Because you're on patrol, correct?
Correct.
That's part of your training.
Yes, I received CPR training in the academy and tourniquet training a few years after that.
Okay. And that was in-house with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you have continuing training in-house with the Sheriff's Office, correct?
It's for other portions of training, yes, sir.
Right. Now, you indicate when you came on scene, it took about 5 minutes to get there, correct?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it true you actually came on scene prior to the bolo even going out by Fortuno? Isn't that true?
No, actually, I reviewed my catalogs, and the Bolo came out as we were arriving on scene. Otherwise, we wouldn't have pulled up to the Red Durango with that being a suspect vehicle. That's not very good tactics.
Now, do you recall taking a deposition in this case on April 9th,
Yes.
2013?
Yes, I do.
Judge, and for the record, I'm referring to page 112, just the way I have it, Your Honor.
I do not have that deposition.
Judge, if we can approach, there are several officers that were put in one deposition by the court reporters.
All right, I see, I got it. Hang on. What page?
Page 112, Your Honor. And Judge, for the
Okay,
record,
okay.
lines 8 through 24.
All right.
Now, Officer Holmes, do you recall me asking you that as far as you were aware, it was only the Red Durango? And your answer was that's all that was put out at that point, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Do you also recall me saying, and it's safe to say in the 5 to 7, I'm talking about your responding time, and you interrupt and say, actually, I don't believe, I think at that point he hadn't put a bolo out yet. I believe all we knew about was the Red Durango.
Yes, sir.
I said, okay. And I said, you answer, I think I put in that report too, but I arrived prior to the bolo being issued. You recall that answer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, today, you're saying you reviewed other reports after your deposition that puts you on scene after the bolo?
It puts us on scene at the same time the Bolo is being delivered. Because it's not good tactics to arrive, to pull up next to a suspect vehicle who just was possibly involved in a shooting. I would never do that.
I apologize, go on.
I said I would never do that.
But didn't you answer under oath in your depo, I think I put that in the report too?
Sustained.
So today you're saying it was at the same time?
Yes, sir, I believe it was the same time.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. In those 5 minutes that it took you to get there, you obviously have no idea what happened prior to you getting there, correct?
Just what I heard on the radio.
Right. And you couldn't know what was going on because you weren't physically present, correct?
Correct.
All right. And at that point, you couldn't know what was going on because you didn't have a bolo yet, right? That happened as you arrived on scene?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when you get there, you indicate there's 2 men on the sidewalk. One is in front of the Durango on the sidewalk and one is way off to the left if you're looking at it, correct?
Not way off. He's probably 5 or 6 feet to the left of it.
Well, did you not mark it on the photograph that we just had?
Yes.
Okay, did you not mark one way off on the side where the bushes are?
The photograph's small. It's kind of hard. The scale's not accurate, but yes, he was standing 5
Well-
6 feet away from the vehicle.
Are you saying the photograph's not accurate?
I'm saying the scale.
Well, a photograph is a true picture of the scene. Are you saying the photograph is not accurate?
Yes, photograph is accurate.
Okay. And parking spaces are about 10 feet apart, correct?
I don't know the width of the parking spaces.
Okay. Assuming that, and we'll just assume that as an estimate, if what you just drew showed about 2 or 3 spaces away, that's not 5 to 6 feet away, correct?
Okay.
Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Did you mark the X's on that screen?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And were the X's where you marked accurate and truthful?
Yes.
And did you have them about 3 spaces away?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you indicate today that when you looked in the vehicle, you see Mr. Davis stretch out across the back, correct?
Yes, sir.
Was he slumped over or was he stretched out?
Stretched out and slumped over. He was leaning to the left.
Okay, well then how can he be stretched out? Was his feet up on the seat or was his feet on the ground?
No, his torso was stretched out.
Okay, but his body was not stretched across the back seat,
No,
correct?
his legs were still forward.
Okay, Judge, may I just approach this area, Your Honor?
Sure.
Thank you, Judge. The way you're sitting now, your feet are facing me.
Yes.
Your body's facing me.
Yes,
Can you please show the jury while sitting there, what do you mean by stretched out?
just leaning all the way over to the left.
Okay, but his leg, just for the record, your legs are still facing me forward, correct?
My legs are, yes.
And was Mr. Davis's legs still forward?
As far as I can recall, yes, sir.
Okay. So his whole body was not stretched out, just the top half was leaning over to his left, slumped over, correct?
Yes.
Now, you actually interviewed some witnesses on scene, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You actually took notes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that was after you had pulled Mr. Davis out of the vehicle?
Yes,
Did you pull Mr. Davis out of the vehicle, or did that civilian pull him out?
I did.
Okay, let me ask you this. Why did you not give CPR?
The civilian said he was trained, and I haven't been trained in CPR in 7 years. Last training I had was the academy.
Okay, and how old are you, sir, if you don't mind me asking?
40.
40?
Yes, sir.
And you've been an officer back then for about 6 years?
Yes, sir.
4 years of Navy experience?
Yes.
And you have a have you ever met this civilian?
No, I have not.
You ever seen him any time before in your life?
No.
And all he said to you is, I'm certified, I'll do it?
Yes.
And you allowed him?
Yes.
When that happened, how many other first responders were on scene?
I don't know how many other police officers were there.
Well, let me ask you this, we've got...
There was at least, at least 3 or 4 others on scene.
Besides you?
Yes, sir.
You even have Reserve Officer Glover, I'm glad you mentioned him. He's a reserve officer, correct?
Yes.
Okay, he wasn't a sworn law enforcement officer, correct?
Nothing I know of, no.
And when we call that, it's actually a volunteer, a civilian volunteer.
Correct.
And he wants to go to the academy and become an officer, correct?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it true, he was the one that roped off the tape at the gate gas station?
Objection, Your Honor.
I don't know.
Sustained.
Are you aware that Reserve Officer Glover taped off that sign?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Okay. Do you know who did it all?
No, sir, I do not.
Do you know what time they did it?
No, sir, I don't.
And matter of fact, the tape wasn't even up until the ambulance came and took Mr. Jordan to the hospital, correct?
I don't recall what time the tape went up.
Is it possible that the tape didn't go up till after the ambulance left?
What's the objection?
Speculation.
Sustained.
If I may just have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Now, when you sought out these witnesses, you took notes, correct?
Yes, sir.
And did you take accurate notes?
Yes, sir.
And are you trained in the academy and through your experience to be truthful, accurate, complete in your notes?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell the jury what you did with your notes?
The notebook itself, it's destroyed, it's gone.
Right. So you didn't preserve those and turn those over to the state to show exactly what you did and what you wrote down, correct?
No, sir.
Now, you talked to Mr. Smith, a Stephen Smith, correct?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it true that Mr. Smith told you that the gentleman who fired the shots was wearing a black hat?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Now, you indicated you transported the 3 men in your car all together, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you said that they were quiet and in shock.
Yes.
Is that normal for an event around some type of shooting?
For a shooting, yes, sir.
And how many shootings have you responded to as an officer?
I don't know, probably 10 or 11 of actual injury shootings.
Yes, sir. Even without injuries, people can still panic and
Yes.
be in shock even without someone being hurt, correct?
Yes, sir.
Would you say having a gun fired is a jarring experience for someone who's not trained or experienced?
Yes, sir, it is.
And you've got experience in the military and as an officer, and you even agree, and that's a fair representation, people could still be in shock when a gun goes off.
Yes, sir.
And you said none of them were crying or carrying on in the back of your car, correct? They
No,
were
sir.
just quiet and in shock?
Yes, sir.
And that's accurate?
Yes.
Now, when you took them to the homicide office, you brought them in, correct?
Yes,
You actually put them in individual rooms, correct?
yes, sir.
Are you aware that those rooms have audio and video recording capabilities?
Yes, sir.
Did you turn them on?
No,
Were you asked to turn them on?
no,
Did the homicide detectives give you any instructions regarding those taped video rooms?
no, sir.
And again, your markings on the pictures today that we just saw were accurate based on your memory.
Yes, sir.
And your testimony was accurate based on your memory.
Yes, sir.
No further questions, Judge.
Ms. Wolfson?
Just briefly, Your Honor.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Officer Holmes, once you got the boys
Can you get
down-
to the microphone, please?
Yes, Your Honor.
Or you can wear one of those body mics if you'd like.
I can stand back here, Your Honor.
Okay.
Officer Holmes, once you took the boys to the police memorial building, did you then turn them over to the homicide detectives?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you have anything to do with what went on from there?
No, I just typed up a report.
Now, Officer Holmes, Mr. Strolla asked you about the tape at the scene, the police tape that went up. Did you have any involvement at all in setting up a perimeter?
No, ma'am.
And why? Why not?
I was inside dealing with the witnesses and Jordan.
So you would have already been inside the perimeter?
Yes, ma'am.
And Officer Holmes, I know you mentioned on your direct that you secured 2 witnesses at the scene.
Correct.
Was one of those witnesses then Steve Smith?
Yes.
Now, did you ever learn the name of the civilian who helped you pull out Jordan Davis from the car?
No, ma'am, I did not.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right. May he be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Stroll?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, officer. You're free to go.